Hi, I'm Erin. I'm the training facilitator with the Pikes Peak Workforce Center. Thank you for joining me today. We're going to be talking about what to do during your next interview. So if you didn't happen to catch 4 things to do before your next interview, you should watch that at some point. But let's jump into what to do during your next interview. And again, with the mindset of, I want you to come across and feel more confident during an interview. So some tips to help you be your best you. Make sure that you keep with your normal routine. You don't want to completely change your sleep cycle unless it's absolutely necessary. Let's say, for instance, you have been working graveyards and you have an interview at a time of day where you would normally be asleep. You might have to change, but unless it's absolutely necessary, keep with your normal routine. Get plenty of sleep. Drink plenty of water. Dehydration is one of the biggest thieves of energy, and you really need to have energy in your interview. So you want to make sure you drink plenty of water in the day leading up to your interview. Eat a good meal, and I should say that's if that's what's normal for you. If you're a person who normally does the I don't eat anything until 2 o'clock in the afternoon, don't force yourself to eat. But if you're a person like me who has to wake up and hit the ground with some food in their mouth, I don't want you to starve yourself and get into that interview and then your stomach is doing the talking for you. So make sure you eat a good meal. Let your body rest in the day leading up to the interview. Now, I'm not saying you have to be a couch potato, but the day before the interview is not the time to say, hey, I'm going to go hike the Manitou Incline for the first time, or today I'm going to meet my personal record and bench 300. This is not the day for that. You want to let your body rest. You also want to let your mind rest. And here's the thing, that's easier said than done. I know before an interview, it's kind of like taking a test when you're in school. You want to keep going through it over and over in your head, but that's going to drive you crazy. Here's the thing, if you've been practicing your responses to those frequently asked questions, then you're ready. Give yourself a break. And the easiest way that I can say to let your mind rest is to go spend time with other people, watch your favorite movie, maybe some funny cat videos, just something that's going to take your mind off of the interview itself. If you haven't been practicing responses to frequently asked questions, I hate to say it, but it's kind of too late. You just have to win them over with your personality at that point. All right, those are some tips to help you be your best you. But what's the most important part of the interview? Is it whether or not you answer their questions perfectly? Is it whether or not you actually check the box for all of their requirements of what they're looking for? The most important part of the interview is the first 7 to 10 seconds. In 7 to 10 seconds, this is how they form, or when they form, their first impression of you. And everything that happens after that first 7 to 10 seconds is going to go through the filter. So how they perceive you in that first 7 to 10 seconds is going to affect how they hear your responses. It's going to affect how they report on your responses. I've sat on a lot of interview panels. I'm never the person that makes the decision. I write down notes based on what I think, and that's how I report on the interview. All the way through, do you get a second interview and do you get the job? All of that goes through the filter of that first 7 to 10 seconds with the first impression. So it's very important to make an effort to go into it knowing I have to make a great first impression. This is not something that you want to wing it. All right, so 3 things you need to do to prepare to make a great first impression. You want to make sure that you come prepared and looking organized. You want to make sure that your communication skills are on par, and you also want to make sure that you're dressed appropriately. So let's start talking about what to wear to an interview. Generally speaking, you want to dress one level above what the expectation would be for the position that you're applying to. Now, you might be thinking, Erin, I don't know what the expectation is going to be. So a couple of things that I've heard people will do, if you could ask when they schedule the interview, whoever is scheduling with you, you could say, what is the standard attire on the job? Or you could, I've heard people do this, they go hang out in the parking lot when it's quitting time and they wait and see what people are wearing. I think it's just better to go kind of with a standard rule of thumb. So if you're applying, for instance, for more, let's say, blue collar type of work, you're applying for a welder position or for some type of janitorial position, it would be really weird if you showed up in a suit. On the job, typically in those types of positions, you'd probably be wearing jeans and a t-shirt of some sort, whether it's an organizational t-shirt or what have you. So one level above that might be some nice slacks and maybe a polo shirt or a short sleeve button-up shirt, for example. Well, if you're in an office setting, generally speaking, you've probably heard the term business casual. Business casual is different everywhere you go. For some places, business casual means you can wear jeans, and other places it's not. So a good rule of thumb, if you're going to be in an office type of setting and more of a professional type of position, then that does include things like customer service or behind the scenes. Maybe an accountant might be behind the scenes. Generally speaking, on the job, you'd be wearing slacks and a nice shirt or blouse of some sort. So now you need to dress one level above, which is generally going to be along the lines somehow of a suit. Now, gentlemen, it's very normal for you to go buy actual suits. It will come with the pants and the jacket together, all of that type of stuff. Women, there's not as many suits out there for us. So coordinates work, meaning you buy the pants and a jacket or cardigan that coordinates with it. That's fine. Now, let's say you're applying for a position as a CEO where you're going to be required to wear a suit. Well, then you need to dress in a tuxedo or an evening. No, I'm just joking. No evening gowns or tuxedos. The suit is the highest you're going to go. So for your main pieces, being a jacket or cardigan, if you're wearing one, if it's appropriate based on the level I just told you, pants or a skirt, you generally want to stick with darker colors. So black, navy blue, charcoal gray, something along those lines. And then whatever shirt you're pairing with it, you want it to be white or pastel, and it's very important that it's not patterned. You are not trying to distract them with your clothing. You want them to pay more attention to, really, for example, how good of a fit you are than how you're dressed, right? So I know some people will argue with me, but Erin, I want to wear my bright red shirt. It's going to stand out and help me pop. Don't do that. You just want to be muted, okay? If you're wearing a tie, for the gentleman, if you're wearing a tie, make sure that your tie is also not patterned. And in this instance, maybe let's say you have on a navy blue or charcoal gray suit, let's say, you might have a red tie, but that's going to be a smaller piece, so it's not distracting too much. Ladies, if you're going to wear a skirt or a dress, you need to make sure that the hemline is no shorter than the tops of your knees when you're standing. And unfortunately, the rule of thumb is if you're wearing a skirt or a dress, you also need to wear pantyhose. And that's why you won't catch me wearing a dress to an interview. So let's say you're wearing pants, you're going to have socks on or some type of hosiery. Make sure that your socks are either the color of your pants or your shoes. If you wear a belt, same thing, color of your pants or your shoes. Your shoes need to be comfortable enough to walk around in. Just in case they decide to take you on a tour of the facility, they should be comfortable enough to walk around in. You're never going to wear any open-toed, so no sandals, no peep toes, ladies, no slingbacks, completely closed shoes. Now you can wear flats or you can wear heels. If you're wearing heels, just make sure they're no taller than 3 inches. And again, make sure that they're comfortable enough to walk around in. I will generally categorize, for instance, the type of shoe that you're going to wear as like a church shoe. It's just going to be a, leather looking, brown or black usually works best, but leather looking type of conservative shoe. Jewelry. Ladies, we get 5 pieces of jewelry. If you wear an earring in each ear, that counts as 2. If you have a wedding ring on, that counts as 3. If you were to wear, let's say, for instance, a watch, that would be 4. So the idea is to not overdo it. And with whatever jewelry you choose, make sure you're not wearing big dangly or hoopy earrings. You want them to be smaller, less noticeable. You don't want to wear the big chunky necklaces, for example. And I know there's some great pieces out there that might match great with your outfit, but you really want it to be toned down. Gentlemen, if you're wearing jewelry, you only get 2 pieces. You get a wedding ring and a watch. if those apply. Don't put a wedding ring on if you're not married. That would be a little bit odd. All right. So that's the jewelry. Make sure that your hair is in a neat professional hairstyle. So if you're somebody who normally goes around with your faux hawk, you might need to, for example, like brush it down or something. I have a lot of ladies ask, should I put my hair up or should I leave it down? Really doesn't matter per se. But the idea is if you know you're a nervous hair fidgeter or hair flipper, I don't have great flippy hair, but if I get nervous and I do this a lot, then put your hair up, okay? But up or down looks fine as long as it's professional and it looks clean. If you're wearing makeup, make sure that they're very neutral tones. Do not overdo it with perfume, cologne, or aftershave. Some people are very sensitive to different scents, and so you don't want to trigger an allergy attack or a migraine headache or anything like that. It's okay to wear a little bit, just don't overdo it. Make sure that your hands, and specifically around and underneath your fingernails, are clean. So you might get one of those fingernail brushes. I'm not saying go get a professional manicure or anything, but make sure they're clean, your hands are clean, and if, either trim your nails, or ladies, if you choose to have a little bit longer nails, just make sure that they look neat and well kept. And if you are wearing nail polish, generally speaking, a good neutral tone is going to work best as opposed to like a bright blue or green or, some loud color. All right, so then let's move and let's look at some examples. This is some do's and don'ts for ladies. We see on the left, we see the lady has on what looks like a navy blue suit with a white shirt. Her skirt length is appropriate. She's got on some pumps. I can't really tell about the pantyhose because they're neutral in color. In other words, they're skin toned. And so that's a good look. On the right, I like how she looks, but it's not appropriate for an interview. I think it looks like she's going to brunch with her girlfriends, which, looks great. But it's way too casual. Between the capri pants and the peep toe shoes, the big chunky purse that has multiple colors, and the bigger, more noticeable necklace, those all look way too casual for a job interview. If we look at the gentleman on the left, he's got on a nice blue suit, nice pastel blue shirt to match with it, and a blue tie. Everything looks like it fits well. On the right, he's got on some pants that are rolled at the bottom. Too casual. He's got on his loafers with no socks. Definitely too casual. And I know the big trend right now for men is to have these funky, fun socks. I get it, but not for an interview. His sweater has the pinstripes going across it. That's too distracting. Now, I always laugh at this picture because it says facial hair should look neat and trimmed. And I look at his facial hair and I think, that looks neat and trimmed to me. It's not Duck Dynasty going on there. So I think he's good. So pick an outfit. You have time to actually do that before the interview. Go through your closet, find, hey, if I were to be called for an interview tomorrow, what would I wear? Try it on. Make sure it still fits. Also, make sure, do I need to run it to the cleaner so that it's ready in time? Do I need to press it or anything along those lines? Because you don't want to leave all of those details for the morning of your interview when you're already feeling stressed out and in a rush. Next, you're going to bring a portfolio with you. So generally speaking, I suggest a leather-looking portfolio that zippers around. And I like the portfolios that actually have the 3-ring binders in the middle, because that allows you to organize. So what are you going to bring with you in this portfolio? Generally speaking, 2 to 4 copies of your resume. Now, if they happen to tell you it's going to be a 5-person panel interview, bring 6 copies of your resume, because you want one for each interviewer and you want one to put in front of you so that when your brain freezes up because you're nervous, you have something to look at to help remind you how awesome you are, okay? You also want to bring 2 copies of your reference page. In the handout, there's information about how to format your reference page and some tips in there for references. And yes, believe it or not, employers still check your references. You also want to bring any, let's say as you were doing research, you were reading this particular article, there were some things you wanted to ask about in the article. It's okay to print that out and actually highlight the areas you want to ask about. And I've had people say, but doesn't that make me look like I'm unprepared? And I say, actually, it's the exact opposite. It actually shows that you did your research and that you're very prepared. So feel free to bring any of that along. Also, if you have any examples of your work or anything that's going to really help sell you, that might be copies of letters of recommendations that you've received. When I interviewed for the training position at the Workforce Center, I had actually already been teaching workshops for several years as one of those other duties as assigned type of things. And so I compiled a list of some of the comments that people made after sitting through my workshops. I only did the nice comments. I left out the mean ones. But I had that. So when I was asked about my presentation style or about my ability to influence people, I pulled out this list of great things that people had said about me, and it was an additional selling point. Bring some water with you. Bring a bottle of water with you. So some employers will be cognizant enough and have water and offer you water, but you don't want to rely on that. And here's the thing, you're talking, you're nervous, your throat might dry out. Having a bottle of water is going to help you so that you don't end up coughing or anything along those lines as well. You'll want to bring thank you notes. Now, those don't necessarily have to be in your portfolio, but you need them with you the day of the interview. That's going to make more sense towards the end here, but you want them with you. So whether you leave them in your glove box or maybe you do have them in the portfolio. And you're going to have all of this organized, okay? You're also going to have the pen and paper. So with most of these portfolios, on the right side, there will be a tablet of paper and there's a little hook for your pen. Make sure that you have pen and paper, and also write down those questions that you plan to ask the employer. Write them down and leave space to put a note about what their response is. Now, I will caution people, be aware of what type of pen you bring. So if you're a nervous clicker, in other words, when you're nervous, you have the pen with the click end and you're just clicking away, you're going to drive them crazy. This is why I say when you practice your interview skills, you want to have everything out just like that. Because if the person you're practicing with says, if you click that pen one more time, I'm going to shove it down your throat, then you know not to bring that type of pen. So pay attention to some of those small details as you're practicing. So bring that portfolio with you. Now, if it is one of these zipper closed leather looking portfolios, a lot of times there's a place in there where you can put your phone and even your keys or your key fob. So ladies, you may not even need to carry a purse with you into the interview. If you're not carrying a purse, just don't leave it in your car where anybody can see it, please. Okay, put it in your trunk. All right. Lastly, to make a great first impression, we want to talk about your communication skills. So there's a lot more to your communication than just the words that come out of your mouth. It's not just what you say, but it's how you say it. I don't know if any of your parents ever said that to you. I hated that when they say it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And I hated that until I had a teenage daughter, and then I completely understood it. One time I told her, if you roll your eyes in the back of your head one more time, you might find a brain back there. And we were having fun. So she kind of laughed at that one. She said, that was a good one, Mom. So 55% of the message that's received is based on your body language. 38% of the message that's received is based on the quality of your voice. And 7% is based on the words that are coming out of your mouth. So let's talk about some of that a little bit more. With regards to your body language, some things I want you to pay attention to, and we'll just start from the top down. So with your eye contact, make sure you're making eye contact with the interviewers. In our culture, eye contact is a signal of both respect as well as the fact that you're paying attention, you're engaged in the conversation. So make eye contact. Now, if, let's say, you have a panel interview where there are 5 people interviewing you, how do you work your eye contact? Generally speaking, they will take turns asking you questions. So what I always suggest is the person who asks you the question, you start your eye contact with that person. As you're responding, you make sure that you make eye contact with each of the other interviewers. And when you're wrapping up, you bring your eye contact back to the person who asked your question. Okay? You do not want to constantly look down. This makes you look very unsure of yourself. If you need to look down, if you're taking a note about something they said, don't try to do this where like you're not actually looking at look down on purpose. That's okay. but you don't want to constantly be moving your eyes down. It makes you look like you have a lack of confidence. You also don't want to look up to the sky. They say that looks as though you're making something up. All right, and don't stare them down. Don't be creepy about it. You can blink. All right, so next let's talk about your posture. Your posture is very important. When you're stressed out, your shoulders tend to creep higher towards your ears. And you don't want that to happen, because then what's happening is your body language is actually sending the brain the message that you're in trouble. And your brain is going to freak out even more. So by controlling your posture, you're actually helping to control what's going on up here a little bit as well. So I think they used to teach it that you like tuck your shoulder blades into your back pockets. So bring your shoulders down, make sure you're sitting up straight. And you want to make sure that you're actually leaning at the waist into the conversation a little bit. You don't want to be on the edge of your seat and you're risking falling off, but you just want to lean at the waist, because this again shows that you're engaged in the conversation. Hand gestures. Are hand gestures okay? Yes, as long as you're not like doing grandiose like Broadway or anything like that. You're not doing a hand jive or anything along those lines. It is okay to use hand gestures if that's what's natural to you. If you're not a person that talks with your hands, I don't want you to put your hands where they cannot be seen. So in your lap or under the table, that's not okay, because then it looks like you're hiding something. So if you're not a person who talks with your hands, it's okay to lay your hands on the table as long as you're not clasping tightly. If you're doing this and your knuckles are changing colors, you're clasping too tightly, and that's probably because you're nervous. So a loose clasp will work. You can put them flat on the table in front of you, anything along those lines. All right, so hand gestures are okay as long as they're not over the top. I already talked about leaning forward at the waist a little bit. And the last thing I want to tell you is have your legs, your feet flat on the floor, legs uncrossed. If you cross your legs, what generally happens is then one leg needs a rest, so you end up crossing the other leg over and then the other one over, and you get a little bit fidgety looking. So feet flat on the floor. And if you're nervous, this is a little trick. If you're nervous, you can wiggle your toes in your shoes and nobody will see, and it will help you get some of that nervous energy out. So that's your body language. Now let's talk about your voice, the quality of your voice. So there are different aspects to the quality of your voice. The first thing I'll talk about is the speed. It's natural when you're nervous that you might talk more quickly. If you catch yourself talking too quickly, it's okay. Take a deep breath, smile, and work on slowing it down. Let's talk about the volume. If you're in an office just one-on-one with somebody, you don't need to project your volume as much as you might if, for example, you're in a conference room with 6 people. So pay attention to the volume. You don't want anybody feeling like you're shouting, but at the same point, you don't want them leaning in because they can barely hear you. All right? Also, the modulation or inflection. You don't want to sound monotone. So I don't know if any of you ever watched Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but you remember Ben Stein's teacher character, Bueller, right? You don't want to sound like that. You need to use modulation and inflection. Now, you heard me say the acronym PIE before, passion, interest, enthusiasm. You can actually use your nerves to your benefit in this sense, because when you're nervous, you tend to speak more excitedly. You tend to be more animated. That demonstrates passion, interest, enthusiasm. So reframe your nerves into being a good thing by saying, I'm going to give them some amazing pie today, right? So that's going to be your quality of voice. And then there's the words that come out of your mouth. Now here's the thing, that's only 7%. And I've had some wisecrackers before say, okay, so I really don't need to worry too much about how I answer as long as my quality of voice and my body language are good. And I say, that is not what I said. So, do you believe this? Yeah, so I'm super excited about this position. I think I'd be a really great fit. Do you believe the body language, or do you believe the words that are coming out of my mouth? What I'm saying is that it all has to match up. If you're saying you're excited about the position, you need to show them with your body language and your voice that you're excited about the position. All right, let's move on to another thing about our body language, which is going to be handshakes. Martin, is there somebody named Martin here? Martin's going to come help me demonstrate a good handshake. So the basis of a good handshake is actually that the web of your hand right here comes fully into contact with the web of the other person's hand. Now, once you're in here, gentlemen, this is especially for you. You don't have to clasp too tightly, okay? Just a little bit of a clasp and you're good. Now, generally speaking, you're going to do about 2 to 3 pumps and break, okay? Don't move yet. So that's the basis of a good handshake. But I want to show you some things that sometimes happen. Let's say you get the over-eager shaker and they just keep doing this, right? This is weird. You don't want to keep doing this. You're getting a nice tricep workout, but you don't want to keep doing this. So a couple of things that you can do in this instance to break the handshake. You can sometimes loosen your grip a little bit, and that will signify that you're done. You can do the top tap out type of method, or if you just change your body language, if you're standing, if you change your body language a little bit, that makes it weird and uncomfortable, and that will signify a break. I also want you to pay attention to this. If you shake a person's hand and you put their hand on the bottom and yours on top, generally speaking, this means you've been in a pretty high position of authority in the past, but you want to make sure you're not doing that, because what it says is I have power and authority over you. So you want the handshake to be as upright as possible, but let's say Martin's the one interviewing me and he does that to me. I'm not going to sit here and like arm wrestle or hand wrestle him up to an upright position, right? I'm like, okay, cool, you got power and authority, good job, dude, right? So those are some qualities of a good handshake. Thank you, Martin. All right, so make sure your handshake is on point. It's actually a really great idea to start shaking hands, even with your friends and family for now, just to practice your handshake, get used to it. You know, ask for some feedback, especially if you're a gentleman shaking a lady's hand. You might say, am I squeezing too tightly or anything like that? I have heard that men in the past have been told to shake women's hands differently than they shake men's hands. Do not do this. It actually is kind of a disrespectful thing to do to a woman. It's like you're not taking her as seriously. So shake a woman's hand the same way that you would shake a man's hand. Also, you don't want to do a limp handshake where you're just kind of like doing this type of thing. Don't do that. It is kind of creepy. And again, it could come across as if you're not that interested in the conversation that's happening. All right, so practice your handshake so that you can make sure that you're giving a good and confident handshake when you walk into your interview. All right, so let's talk about the types of interviews you might have. There are group interviews. Now, group interviews generally mean that there are, let's say, 3 candidates being interviewed for the same position in the same room at the same time by the same person. And so this can be a little bit odd because you need to make sure that your voice is being heard, you're getting your answers out, but you also want to make sure that you're not stepping on the other person's toes with regards to not letting them answer. Now, on the flip side of the group interview, and those don't happen very often, you have the panel interview. Panel interviews are very common. I would say they're the most common type of interview. And generally speaking, that means there might be several of the interviewers. So let's say there's 5 people from the company interviewing you for the position. Now, a lot of job seekers really hate this because they say, oh my gosh, there's 5 people's eyes on me, judging me. I feel like I'm really in the interrogation seat. And if I answer the question incorrectly, like the floor is going to open up and there's going to be a tank of man-eating sharks down there. And so they really freak out about these panel interviews. Well, a lot of companies will use the panel interviews because it is an opportunity for them to, number one, kind of cover themselves to make sure that nobody can come and say, hey, they asked me an illegal question, because there were other people in the room to state that there was not an illegal question answered. But I want to help you flip that. Panel interviews give you a great opportunity because most interviewers, just like us as human beings in general, we have biases. And even in the interview, there might be certain biases that they have that they're not aware of. Maybe I only remember the very first person that interviewed and the last person that interviewed. Maybe one of the other interviewers, they have the bias where they tend to really lean towards people that are more like them. So I'm a woman. If you're a man, you're out, right? That type of thing. So interviewers have biases. And so if you have a panel, you have an opportunity that you will connect with at least one of those people on a level where you're able to win them over. Now, there's the traditional interview, which is a one-on-one. And these do happen. They're more often used in second or third or, follow-up types of interviews. In this instance, there's one person interviewing you. You're usually in a smaller office, that type of thing. Then you've got the video interviews, and there's two different types of video interviews. The first is like a virtual interactive video. So that might be like a Zoom or a Skype type of video interview or something along those lines. These are often used if you're out of the area. So let's say it's a job that's in another state. They might choose to do a virtual interview with you. Then there's the one-way video interview, and some companies use this. It's a little bit weird as the person being interviewed, because they'll send you the questions and you have to record yourself responding to those questions, and there's a timer generally for those. You're not actually interacting with anyone, so it really does remove any interaction from the interview process, which can be a little bit nerve-wracking. But generally speaking, they will allow you to re-record each question like at least once. So if you're not happy with the first time, you can redo it, which you don't have the opportunity to do in person. Phone interviews are also a common type of interview. And I will say phone interviews are usually used for that very first interview. It's kind of like a screening that they use to decide, do they want to actually have you come in for a full-length in-person interview? And I'll give some tips on video and phone interviews towards the end. All right, so let's talk about some specific interview etiquette and tips. Before you even walk into the interview, make sure you put your phone on silence, but not just the silence where it can still vibrate, because we can still hear that, right? You want to make sure that the vibrate mode is turned off and it's on silent. If for some reason you forget and you're in the interview and your phone starts to ring, please do not pick up your phone and look at it, using the mouse here. Please do not pick up your phone and look at it to see who's calling. You want to quietly, we all know, we should know on our phone, there's some type of a button that silences it, and you can just reach down and touch that, silence it and say, I'm so sorry, I meant to turn that off before I came in. Then you can actually turn it off after you've silenced it, just to make sure, because what if the person calls back, right? Make sure that if you have any like chewing gum or a mint in your mouth or anything like that, make sure that it's gone before you walk into the interview. And I do like to say that your interview starts before you actually walk into the building. So don't spit your gum out in the parking lot or something like that. Somebody could see that. And that's a reflection of who you are. I will even take it further, and sometimes driving to the interview, you want to be careful on that as well. You don't want to get to the interview and the person that you cut off is the person interviewing you. Generally speaking, you want to get to your interview about 10 to 15 minutes before the interview is scheduled to start. If you get there too much sooner than that, it puts a lot of pressure on them. You also don't want to be coming in at the very last minute within 5 minutes of the interview, because then it looks like that's how you're going to be. You're going to be the person that's always showing up at the very last minute. You're not very prepared. But also then that doesn't leave you time to do what's next. So generally speaking, when you check in for your interview, you say, hi, I'm Erin, I'm here for the interview. There's this person. Now, I don't know what their role is. They might be an administrative assistant. They might be a security guard. I don't know what their role is, but this person is who we call the director of first impressions. They will no doubt be asked what they thought of you. And so you want to talk to this person while you're waiting for the interview. And it doesn't have to be specifically about the job or anything. You want to stay away from anything negative. So you don't want to say, oh man, the commute up here was terrible today, because you want to work there. So that's likely what the commute might be like every day. You don't want to talk about the weather being bad. So, maybe instead of saying, oh man, it's just raining so much, I can't even enjoy my summer, you might say, I'm loving all this moisture that we're getting. It's free water for my grass. So always stay on the positive, but talk to this person. Because when they're asked after you leave, hey, what did you think of Erin? If this person says, oh, I don't know, she was on her phone the whole time, I really didn't get a chance to talk to her, that is not a good look. So you want to make sure you have a good conversation with them. Now, let's say, for instance, you're trying to have a conversation and they go, I'm sorry, I'm under a tight deadline. I really don't have time to talk. Then let them off the hook, right? Then you're done. But don't pull out your phone and start playing games on your phone or anything. Just sit there and patiently await, take a deep breath, all of those types of things. Now, generally speaking, that someone will actually come get you for the interview and walk you back to the room. And so when you get back to the room, generally the interviewers are there to greet you. And I'm going to talk interviewers as in panel because that's what's most common. So when you walk in, you're going to shake each person's hand and introduce yourself. Make eye contact and smile. All right, you're going to get each person's name. Now, I'm going to give you a little trick in just a second, because if you're like me and you don't remember people's names by the time you sit down, that could be a problem, right? But as much as possible, try to remember their names, and then wait for them to motion for you to sit or for them to sit down first. Don't just shake their hands and then plop down in the chair like, oh, thank God that part's over, right? Now, let's say there's a chance that they put you in a room and you're waiting and the interviewer comes in to you. Make sure you stand up to shake their hand and greet them, and then wait to sit back down until they motion for you to sit or until they sit. So then once you've introduced yourself, you've sat down, again, pay attention to the body language, use good posture, all of those types of things. Now they're going to start asking you questions. Now, if the person asking you the question, let's say you don't remember their name, you need their name. It's going to be really important for your follow-up. So then what you can do is you can say, that's a really great question. And what was your name again? And when they tell you their name, write it down. I forgot to mention that. When you sit down, before it gets started, write down the people's names that you remember, okay? You want their name written down. And then once you've written their name down, you can say, awesome, Sherry. Well, so, and then you launch into your response to the question. This is not a race gate that opens up. When they ask you the question, it's not like you have to come out hot, like right off the bat. You can take some time to organize your thoughts. Usually anything up to about 30 seconds is okay. So if they ask a question and you kind of want to think about what's the best response for this, take some time to organize your thoughts. Please do not start talking about stuff that's not relevant or not important or not what you really want to say. The average attention span of an American adult is 8 seconds. It's actually 1 second shorter than that of a goldfish. Now, when I heard that, I was like, wait a minute, who got paid to see how long they could keep the attention of a goldfish? Anyways, that's besides the point. So I'm not saying they're only going to pay attention for 8 seconds, but if you don't get to important information within the first 8 seconds, if you start talking about other stuff, you have likely lost them at that point. So that's why it's important to use silence to organize your thoughts. If it's a multi-part question where, let's say they ask, tell me about a time when you had a deadline and you knew you weren't going to make it, and what was the outcome, for example. You might jot down just a few words to help you remember both parts so that you don't answer the first part of the question and then say, I'm sorry, what was the second part yet again, right? So use your pen and paper. That's what it's there for. Also, feel free to ask them. If you don't understand their question or you're not sure exactly what they're looking for, you can ask for clarification. Can you clarify that? Now, some employers might say we're not allowed to clarify. And don't worry, that's usually because they don't want to give somebody an advantage over another person. But if they say they can't clarify, you might be able to ask them to repeat the question, or you might kind of give an example of, are you looking for this before you start to respond, so that then you're able to talk on the point that they're actually asking for. Once you've given your answer, be quiet. This is very important. A lot of times what people do, there's almost this awkward silence because they're taking notes about what you said. And a lot of people, because it's awkward and it's silent, they'll start talking again. Well, one thing is that makes it sound like you weren't that confident in your first response, but the other thing is you might have just interrupted their train of thought of what they wanted to write down. And I've actually had this happen when I was an interviewer and somebody started talking and I was writing notes, so I stopped to listen to them, and then I could not remember what it was that I wanted to write down. And that could have been a really good thing. I could have had really good feedback for them. So once you're done responding, Let that silence be there. And the silence can work in a couple of other handy ways for you. It's a great chance for you to kind of get yourself together if you're nervous, take some deep breaths. And I don't mean the type of deep breath that, they're going to audibly hear. So you don't want to go, right? Don't do that. But it's a great chance to get your breathing under control. It's a great chance to just smile and relax. Now, every once in a while, they might ask a question where you really need some more time to think about it. So it would be okay, maybe once during an interview, to say, that's a really great question. Can we come back to that question? So if you ever watched any type of game shows where it's like pass, that's what you're doing. You're asking for a pass. This is also a great time in between questions to think on the response of any questions that you might have tabled for later. All right. Also, again, make sure that your posture's good. Smile. I played Annie in a ballet when I was a kid, and what she said is true. You're never fully dressed without a smile. So make sure that you're fully dressed. Make sure you smile. All right. Be honest with your responses. I mentioned in the first video 4 things to do before your interview. You want to be authentic. You don't want to try to trick them into liking you. You want to be authentic in your responses and those types of things that motivate you and your strengths. It's very important that you're authentic. Avoid using any kind of jargon. Understand that, yes, you might have somebody in the room that is either going to be a direct supervisor or understands very well the role that you'll be filling, but there might also be some other people who have no clue what you're talking about. So I always use IT for an example on this one, because that's one of those things that if somebody started talking IT jargon to me, I would have no clue what they're talking about. If they said C++ and Java, I'd be like, okay, you were an average student and you like coffee. No, I actually know better than that. But they might not know, so don't use jargon or acronyms when talking to them. All right. Make sure that you take notes on things that they're saying, especially on their responses to the questions that you've asked them. Take notes on that. That's going to come in very handy later. All right. Make sure that you ask them, what are the next steps going to be? This is one of those questions you can ask. I don't usually count it among the 5 or 3 that I'll have prepared, but you can ask them, what are the next steps, so that you understand the timeline. Make sure before you leave that they know whether or not you're interested. Don't assume that just because you showed up for an interview that they're going to know that you're interested, because sometimes people come into interviews and they learn things about the position that makes them not interested anymore. So make sure they know. And you can simply say something like, after talking with you today, I'm even more excited about this opportunity. Whatever comes natural to you to, but make sure they know you're interested. And then thank them for their time. So those are some interview etiquette and tips for you. Now let's talk about specifically the phone and video interviews. So phone interviews, as I mentioned, these are generally like first types of interviews that they'll do over the phone. They cannot see you on a phone interview at all. So the quality of your voice becomes even more important. Whenever possible, you want to use a landline. If it's not possible, I know a lot of us don't have landline phones in our houses anymore. So if you are using a cell phone, make sure you're in an area with really good reception and don't move. You don't want to be doing things. And actually that goes to another point. Don't multitask. I've been on interview panels before and I hear people putting away dishes. I've heard, and it sounds like maybe a person is running on the treadmill or something. So don't multitask. You would not put away dishes in an in-person interview, so don't do it on a phone interview either. Give them your full attention. Now, I do suggest with a phone interview, when you answer, don't answer like you weren't expecting the call. Especially if it's a scheduled phone interview, don't say hello like you don't know who this is. Answer the phone with authority. Hi, this is Erin. Get that phone call started right off the bat. Also, make sure that the quality of your voice is good, like I said. And I do believe that it's true that people can hear when you're smiling on the phone. So try to smile as much as possible. You also want to make sure that your answers are direct and concise. Make sure you have a few questions to answer them. If it's a phone interview, I generally suggest 2 to 3 questions that you can ask them. Make sure you have pen and paper so you can take notes just like any other interview. Now, on the video, whether it's virtual or one way, so on the video interview, now they can see you, and guess what? They can also see your background. So that's one thing, is to make sure that you're not sitting like in your bed or in the bathroom or, in your man cave that's got the beer and whiskey and all of that stuff behind you. You want to be in an area that looks professional. Always when they tell you whatever, hey, we're going to be doing a Skype interview or a Zoom interview, if you have not used those products very much, make sure that you've downloaded them at least the day before and you want to practice them. So you might ask a friend or family member, maybe you know that they've used this. So, hey, can we jump on a Skype really quick because I want to practice because I have an interview tomorrow. And that will give you the opportunity to get used to where are the controls for the audio, the video, those types of things. You can see what they're going to see behind you. You can figure out where your webcam is. Some people don't know that. And with your webcam, this is another great reason to practice, because depending on where the webcam is placed, sometimes if you look at the webcam, it actually makes it look like you're not making eye contact with them. So you want to know that. So sometimes if you look at the monitor, it looks like you're doing this and you're looking down away from them. So as you're practicing, you can see yourself on the camera oftentimes, so you can see, does it look like I'm making eye contact? Does it look like I'm above them, below them, any of that type of thing? Again, just like any other interview, you're going to want to make sure that you have all of your information in front of you. You answer the questions clearly and concisely. Now, for a video interview, you definitely need to be dressed for an interview. You need to be dressed just the same as if you were going to an in-person interview. For a phone interview, that's not necessary, but I still say don't do a phone interview in your pajamas or your yoga pants or anything like that, because then you don't feel at the same level of professionalism, and that could come through in your responses. All right, so let's talk about what you're going to do when you leave the interview. I told you you need to bring thank you cards with you. So the first thing you do when you leave an interview is you're going to go somewhere, not home, but you're going to go somewhere. So whether you just go out to your car in the parking lot, whether you go down the street to a McDonald's or Starbucks or the park or whatever, you're now going to pull out these thank you cards, and you're going to write a thank you card to each person. So yes, the director of first impressions, I'm going to write a thank you card. Let's just say her name was Debbie. So I'm going to write a thank you card to her, and I'm going to say, Debbie, thank you for taking the time to talk to me while I was waiting for my interview. As you might imagine, there's a lot of anxiety building up, and you really helped me feel more comfortable before I walked in. Now, I like to be presumptuous, so I would throw in there at the end, thank you again so much, and I look forward to working for you or with you in the future. I'm going to sign my name and I'm going to print my name. I'm also going to write a separate thank you note to each one of the interviewers. So if there were 5, I need to have 5 different thank you notes for them. And there are a couple different things you can do with the thank you notes for the interviewers themselves. You're always going to address them with the level of formality. So if they introduce themselves as Mr. Smith, you're going to put Mr. Smith. If they introduce themselves as Will, you're going to put Will, okay? Will Smith. I was going off of that, Independence Day. I don't know. So the first thing you're going to say is, thank you for taking the time to interview me for the whatever position. Name the position that you interviewed for, because they might have been interviewing for more than one position. The second thing that you're going to do, and you have a couple of different options here. One option is that you can remind them of something that they seemed rather impressed with. So they might have said, oh, wow, you actually have experience in transitioning to a new software. And so you're going to remind them of that. You know, I really enjoyed our conversation about transitioning software, and I really think I can help with your goal of this. Or it might be if you walk out of the interview and you have one of those aha moments where you're like, why didn't I say that? Oh my gosh. So you can put that in the thank you card. Maybe, for instance, they said, you know, a person in this position really needs to have great attention to detail, and your brain didn't think in the moment, but now you've walked out and you're like, oh, I forgot to tell him this. You can put a little teaser in the thank you note for that. I'd love to tell you about how my attention to detail helped my company pass a federal audit and received continued funding. Okay, I'm not giving all the details, giving a little teaser. The third option is, let's say the person that you're writing the thank you card to is the person who you've been having either phone or email contact with to schedule that type of thing. So it's as simple as you could just say, it was so nice to finally put a face with a name. You've been so helpful throughout this journey. All right, so those are 3 options for the second part. Then again, you're going to wrap it up by saying, thank you so much, and make sure that you put something in there about your interest in the position. Thank you so much. I really think that this would be an amazing fit for both parties, or I really think that I can help you meet your goals. Help them to know that you're interested. Now, for the interviewer's thank you cards, you're going to sign and print your name. You also want to make sure that you include both your email address and your phone number in the thank you card. Now, once you're done writing out these thank you cards, and I've had people say, can I pre-write them before I go in? No, because you need to see how the interview goes first. You want this to be after the fact so that you're actually writing based on what happened in the interview. So once you're done writing out these thank you cards, you're going to go right back to the company and you're going to deliver them. And it might still be Debbie sitting at the front desk, so you're going to put her card at the bottom, for example, and you're going to walk in and you're going to say, could you please deliver these at your earliest convenience? And then when Debbie gets to her card, she's going to feel pretty special that she got one. But here's the thing. Here's the reason why I say don't go home. Because first of all, the biggest impact for thank you cards is within the first 24 hours. Even if you put it in the mailbox, it's not going to make it there in 24 hours. If you go home, I know what's going to happen. You're going to sit down on the couch, and then the next thing you know, maybe dinner needs to be cooked, or you need to run to the store, the kids need to go to soccer practice or whatever. Life takes over. And then you find yourself 2 or 3 days later going, oh, I still haven't sent out my thank you note. And by then they might have already made a decision. All right. So you want to take those right back. Now, if you have a virtual or a telephone interview, so if you have a video or a telephone interview, then you send a thank you email. But I generally suggest against that if you had an in-person, because we all get emails all the time. We don't pay as much attention to our emails. A handwritten thank you card, and that's as simple as going to like a dollar store and buying the cheap thank you cards that just say thank you on the outside. So you want to take those handwritten thank you cards because those are actually going to stand out a bit more. All right, let's talk about follow-up. I always say that the second most important part of an interview is what you do after you leave. So that thank you card is the first thing, that thank you is the first thing, but then you have 3 opportunities to do follow-up. Generally speaking, you're going to do your follow-up based on the timeline that they gave. So that's why it's so important to ask them, what are the next steps? What's the timeline? That type of thing, because they're going to give you an idea, and then based on that timeline, you can start with your follow-ups. Your follow-ups can be by telephone or by email. Either one works. If you know that you've been emailing back and forth with this person, stick with email. If it's been phone, stick with phone, or you could change that up. So you get 3 attempts. So let's say they said, oh, we're hoping to schedule second interviews by next Thursday. Well, Thursday comes and goes. I didn't hear anything from them. I have to give them through the end of the day because they didn't say first thing in the morning on Thursday. Friday morning comes. I didn't hear anything from them on Thursday. I'm generally going to wait probably a few hours into the day. And if I haven't heard from them, then I'm going to try my first follow-up. And let's say this time I call. Now, if you get them on the phone, great, you're going to have a conversation. If you don't, you're going to leave a voicemail. Hi, this is Erin. I again wanted to thank you for taking the time to interview me for such and such position last week. I was checking to see if you made any decisions yet. Now, this is also a great chance if you had that aha moment after the interview where you're like, why didn't I tell him this? This is also a great chance to throw in a little teaser for that. I wanted to mention this. Or this is also a great chance. Let's say one of your questions was about what are their department goals? And they told you, or they said, we're looking at migrating our IT system over to this. And so this is a great chance. You can say, I've been thinking about what you said with this being your goal, and I have some ideas. You're not going to tell them the ideas now. You're just saying, I've been thinking about what you said to me, and I have some ideas I'd love to share with you. So you leave that voicemail. Now, in between attempted follow-ups, you're going to generally leave 3 to 5 business days. So if, for example, they don't respond to you. Now, let's say it's 3 business days later. So that was Friday morning. So we're going to go like Wednesday morning. I didn't hear anything. Maybe this time I'll try emailing them because they didn't respond to voicemail. I don't know. Maybe they don't check their voicemail. Whatever the case may be. So maybe I try email this time. same type of information in an email follow-up. Again, if I get no response to them, 3 to 5 business days before I attempt again. And if I attempt again by email or phone call and they still haven't responded, it's then time to cut the cord. All right. But if they're responding, if they're engaging you, so maybe I do email them a follow-up and they respond and they say, oh yeah, things have just been so hectic and so had to leave on an emergency trip. And so we're waiting for them to get back. Then I'm going to stay engaged with them. And I might say, okay, awesome. I completely understand that. When would be a good time for me to follow up? Or whatever the case may be, but I'm going to stay on their radar. Now, if let's say you get the rejection, you get an email or a phone call where they say, thanks, but we decided to go with someone else. I highly suggest that you leave on a good note, and this is a great way to do so. You could say, well, thank you so much for the opportunity to interview. It was great learning more about the company and the position. Is there anything that I could have done differently to be a better candidate or to improve upon my interview skills for you in the future? When you ask this question, it does a couple of things. First of all, you might actually get some real feedback. They might say, no, but we just think that we went with someone with experience in this and you don't have that experience. So maybe that gives you an opportunity to say, I need to go get experience in this program or whatever. They might not give you feedback. They might say, no, you were great. We just went with someone with more experience, or whatever the case might be. We just went with someone internal. Whatever the case might be, you say, awesome, well, good luck to you. And, I'll keep an eye out for other positions in the future. Sometimes when a company hires someone, that person might not work out. And if that person is quickly determined that they don't work out, then they might actually, rather than reposting the position, they might go back to the people that they interviewed before. And because you left them on a good note, because you wished them luck, that type of thing, then they might remember you. So those are things to do during your next interview. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video today. Again, if you didn't watch the first part, 4 things to do before your interview, please take the time to go watch that. It all ties together. Thank you so much and have a great day. Good luck in your job search.